my name is Angie. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. This is a channel where I typically like to make videos about books as well as videos about homeschooling, mostly book related. Today's video is a book video. I'm going to do my wrap up for May. It was a really fun month, and it ended up being a number of fairly large books, which I wasn't anticipating. So let me just hop in. Okay, the first book I want to talk about is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This is the first book in the Broken Earth trilogy. I read this as a part of a book club that is run by Emily over at ARG Schooling. I'll link her YouTube channel below. She's great. I originally gave it a 4-star. I don't know. I'm probably going to drop it to a 3-star. I'm still thinking about that. Just not sure where to put my finger on this one. So let me describe it a little bit to you. It is actually kind of hard to describe. It is about a world that has undergone kind of an earthquake or a rift of some sort that creates ash being put into the air, and it starts a new season is kind of what they're described as, where people have to figure out ways to survive the earthquake. And then you're following the point of view of 3 different characters, 3 women kind of in different seasons of life, and it flashes kind of forwards and backwards and kind of all over the place. So you're trying to put together the timeline as well as what part these women play in the story. So I don't really want to say too much about it because I don't want to give too much away, but I do want to mention this. If you pick this book up, if you haven't already, there is a glossary in the back of the book that is very helpful, because there is some words that are thrown around, especially early on, that you're like, I don't know what's going on. I'm not really used to reading fantasy, sci-fi, and so that was very helpful. Okay, so some thoughts I had about it. I liked it. It was fast-paced. It really kept my attention. I was engaged with the characters, so that was all really good. I really liked one of the main characters, Asan. She's a mom. She's looking for her daughter, and her character was good. She was a little hard to relate to, but you could definitely tell that that was on purpose. You could tell that there was some backstory to her life that needed some explaining to why she was the way she was. I'd say one of my biggest hang-ups was probably the fact that this book is not kind to moms of like toddlers. There's some just hard stuff in here that you're just like, I don't know if I want to keep reading about this. This is a little too close to home, especially for me where I have twin 2-year-olds. There also was part of the book is told in second person, which is very interesting. And I wouldn't say that was a con for me. It was just interesting. I have never read a book where there's like this narrator out there that's like, well, you felt this way about that as she's talking about this character. So I liked it. I thought it was good. I don't know if I'll continue. I just don't know if my mom heart can handle any more of that plot line. I don't know. If you've read this, I know a lot of people love it. Let me know your thoughts. So the next books I read for 2 read-athons that I participated in. I participated in Quarantineathon, put on by April over at Getting Hugga With It, and the other read-athon was Springathon, which was put on by Emma over at A Cup of Books, and Natalie. I forgot Natalie's channel. I'll link them all below though. And I really enjoyed both of those read-athons. I picked up a lot of good books. The first one I picked up for Quarantineathon was so good. So good, right? Like, I feel like most people have this feeling about this book. If they make it through, I've heard a number of people that just couldn't make it through the beginning. And it is a little slower in the startup, but I thought the character development was so rich that it was worth working through kind of some of that at the beginning. Anyway, this is a book about a girl named Liesl. She becomes an orphan. She is dropped off at a foster family in Germany after her brother dies. There's something going on with her mom that makes it so that she can't keep her children, and so she gets dropped off at a foster family. And the foster family is part of what I really loved about this book, is the dad especially was just wonderful. He taught her how to read. Liesl also starts stealing books. I guess the initial book she stole wasn't on purpose, but then she starts to learn to love reading, and then she starts kind of stealing on purpose, which I liked that kind of storyline throughout. She also has to wrestle with a Jewish man that they house in their basement to protect him from the Nazis. But one thing I really liked is just the perspective of the German citizen. I feel like they often get vilified along with the Nazis, and they're just people, a lot of times just trying to get by, trying to figure things out, and that was really what this family was. And she was definitely a part of the family. She wasn't just the foster child. So I really loved it. 5-star. So I like this and I recommend it. So good. The next book I read for Springathon, so I was kind of hopping back and forth on my read-athons. This was Lab Girl by Hope Jaron, and I'm so glad I finally got to this because I had started it. It's kind of memoir, nonfiction kind of book. It is about a woman who is a scientist. Then it tells her story as she progresses through grad school, postdoc, getting her own lab, trying to get funding in a very difficult season of funding. And so I loved it. And like I said, I have my PhD in microbiology, so at least I understand up through the graduate school, a little bit of postdoc, but mostly I wanted to teach. So I knew I wasn't going to become a research scientist, but it was fun to kind of hear her perspective of what being a research scientist was like. And then on top of it, her story was just really engaging. She was funny. She struggled with some stuff for sure, some kind of like manic depressive stuff. She shared it in a very beautiful way, but she was also very funny, and I enjoyed her stories. And then I loved also her little tidbits about plants, which I knew a lot of them because I taught Bio 101, and you have to teach about plants and trees. But she said it in a way that you could just feel the love she had for the subject matter. So I definitely gave that one a 5 stars as well. I really, really enjoyed it. I read Blue Monday by Nikki French. I read this for Quarantineathon, and this was really good. This is about a psychotherapist named Frida Klein who was meeting with a client, and the client described kind of his ideal child, his kind of fantasy child, because they were struggling with infertility and getting pregnant. And then there's a boy who goes missing not long after he describes that, who fits the same description as the boy he describes in his fantasy. So she approaches the police and gets involved. And so my thoughts, 5 star. I really enjoyed it. It was a book that I had to keep reading. I think I was saying this in another video. I was reading it while I was cooking. I was reading it while my kids were playing. I just couldn't put it down. And to me, very few books do that. And they're usually suspense mystery type books that keep me pulled in. This one really did. It really did. And some of the things I really liked about it was the fact that she was a psychotherapist, and so she brought in kind of psychology into the mystery. So you knew there was some extra like mind things going on. And I like that. I thought that just kind of added a flavor that was more than just a police procedural. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed her character. I thought her character was very likable, not in the warm and friendly sort of character, but more in very straight-laced, very serious, very all about her profession. But there's some vulnerability under the surface, you could tell. Because this is a series. I think it goes all the way through the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I don't know where it ends, but I have a number of books left. So I like that I get to revisit her character again. So 5 star. Love this book. Okay, the next book I have actually is not for the read-athon. The last one is. So I jumped into this book because my husband and I are kind of taking a deep dive into books that have to do with science and God and faith in June. Check out my June TBR if you're interested in that. It is very specific, and I know that might not interest all people or anybody. I'm not really sure, but it is something that's important to me. I read a few books, these two, at the end of May that kind of jump-started it. So this one I loved. It's called 7 Days That Divide the World by John Lennox. It's a very short book. Actually, I mean, most of it's appendices. He actually only has 5 chapters where he talks about how to read Genesis. He has just a way of writing that just doesn't assume much, and I like this. It's not like it's either this or it's this, which a lot of books and a lot of people kind of take those stances. And like, for instance, he says, we noted earlier that the primary impression given by the biblical creation account is that God did not do everything at once. So I like this use of like primary impression. So it's not saying hard and fast, black and white. He has a way of going through just the different days, and can you look at it this way? Can you look at it that way? Can you look at it in a young earth perspective? Can you look at it in an old earth perspective? And it's like, yes, yes. So I liked that way of understanding maybe where another person's coming from. Another thing I really liked about this book was that he introduced the topic in the first chapter with the idea that like, this is not a new problem. We tend to think that in kind of our culture is like, well, this is the first time this has ever happened. Science not agreeing with God and Christianity or faith. And it's not true. Like he brought up the example of the controversy hundreds of years ago where it was about the position of the earth relative to the sun. That Christians believed that the earth was fixed and the sun rotated around it based on certain passages in Job and Psalms and different places. And then science, like Copernicus and other scientists, Galileo, all these people started to say, well, no, the earth rotates around the sun. And there's a huge controversy, huge. And then it kind of worked itself out. There was like the science kind of built up enough, and it wasn't showing that it was in direct controversy to God, and that Christians could understand it and see science and see how God made it in a way that wasn't like black or white. And so it just gave that example, and I just loved that. So this book, so good. It might be my favorite of all we read, and it was the first, but we'll see. So I loved this, 5-star. Last book. I initially picked this up for the Springathon. It also goes well with my current deep dive into science, prehistory, all the things, age of the earth, all the things. And so this is called Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. This is a book about what is believed to be the human experience. So kind of from the beginning of time, what was it like to live in the Stone Age, Neanderthals, kind of all of those prehistory humanoid groups that are talked about. And that was probably the most interesting for me because that's the question I have in my head. But it also went through other things like how did humans go from a small group to taking over the planet, different things like we had the ability to socialize and come together as a group, believe in different things. We took on agriculture, religion, empires, money, all these things it kind of covers. Now, what do I think about it? I thought it was interesting. Like I just said, most interested in kind of that prehistory, like what do we know? What do archaeologists know? What's been found out? What has been discovered? And so I was most interested in that, and it did give me some clues in there. That was my favorite part for sure, was kind of to understand a little bit more of the thoughts on how those people interacted, how they worked as a group, how they caught mammoths, how they moved and spread across the globe. I liked that. I really did. I thought that was interesting. The rest of the book, I'm not sure if I loved. I feel like he almost took off on too much. Like there's just too much information, and it does relate to humans. It relates to how we operate. And so that's all true and good. It just felt almost like too many topics. Like I'm just like, every chapter could have just been its own book. But some of the things I didn't like, there's just this tone of just kind of blasé, like, well, we're just a bunch of animals. And there's just no hope in anything. Like this just happens, and then this happens, and then it's all genetics. Nothing's deeper, nothing's more meaningful. And that's okay. I don't have to have the book agree with kind of how I view things. I just thought that sounded a little bit depressing. So that wasn't my favorite. So I'm glad I read it. It's definitely a good one for Springathon. But I'm sitting more at a 3-star for this one probably. So those 6 books were what I read in May. And so it was good. It was interesting. I loved the read-athons. Thank you, April. Thank you, Natalie and Emma, for hosting, for running those read-athons. I always enjoy read-athons. That's what I have. Thank you for watching. Please take the time to like and subscribe if you like what you see. Okay, have a wonderful day. All right, take care.